I woke up to the quiet hum of our suburban street, just as the first pale rays of November sun slipped through the blinds. From my bedroom window, I watched the oak trees, dropping their last stubborn leaves onto the lawn, layering gold. Over fading green, the world felt still, almost reverent, as if holding its breath for winter. I pressed my hands against my swollen belly, feeling the slow shift of life within me. After 7 years of tears, hormone shots, and silent prayers in the middle of the night, I still couldn't believe Noah was real. My miracle, my second chance. Every morning I thanked God for him, and every morning a small voice inside me whispered, "Protect him, at all costs." I woke up before dawn, long before the first hints of November light filtered through the blinds. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the heater kicking on, warming the cold morning air. I sat up slowly, feeling the familiar tightness in my lower back and the weight of my belly as it shifted with Noah's sleepy movements inside me. Each morning lately began like this, me half awake in the dark, pressing both hands against my stomach to feel the flutter of life that I once believed would never come. Outside the window, our street lay under a quiet veil. The tall oak trees that lined the front yard stood bare, their knotted branches stretching out like dark veins against the pale sky. Brown and gold leaves lay scattered across the damp grass, clinging stubbornly to the earth as if refusing to be swept away. Soon snow would come and cover everything with silence. But this moment, this final gasp of autumn, felt sacred. 7 years. 7 years of waking up to negative tests, to empty rooms, to a hollow ache I couldn't fill, no matter how many times Ethan told me we still had time. I remembered each hormone injection, each ultrasound, where the doctor's smile never reached her eyes. Each failed cycle added another stone to the growing grief inside me, until I couldn't walk through the baby aisles at Target without my throat closing up. And then, just when I was beginning to accept a future without another child, he came to me. A faint second pink line on a plastic stick I'd almost thrown away without checking. I had laughed and sobbed at the same time, clutching it to my chest, while standing in the bathroom with toothpaste foam still on my lips. Noah. His name came to me in a whisper that morning. It felt like a promise. I shifted my weight and stood by the window, resting my forehead against the cool glass. The streetlights outside flickered against the early dawn, making the empty sidewalks glow. Inside me, Noah twisted softly, and a pang of love so deep it almost hurt pulsed through my chest. I wondered what he would look like. Would he have Ethan's golden hair, or my dark curls? Would his eyes be brown or blue? Or something in between, like morning fog? Would he be quiet and watchful like Mia? Or fierce and wild, breaking open my world with every smile? The thought made my throat tighten. Mia, my sweet girl. 8 years old and already so wise in ways she shouldn't have to be. She had seen my tears, had heard my whispered prayers when I thought she was asleep. Sometimes she would slip into bed beside me on those long nights, her little arms wrapping around my neck, as if trying to hold my broken pieces together. I would stroke her hair and whisper back, "It's okay, baby. Mama's okay." But we both knew I wasn't. A movement caught my eye outside. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light flickered on as Mr. Henderson came out in his slippers to grab the newspaper. He waved when he saw me at the window. I forced a small smile and raised my hand in return. Life here moved on like clockwork, newspapers at dawn, sprinklers hissing in the summer Halloween, pumpkins rotting on front steps in the fall. But beneath that perfect suburban rhythm, there were always small, quiet truths hidden away. Secrets that lived behind closed doors and silent hallways. I pressed my palm harder against my belly. Stay safe, little one. Somewhere deep inside, a shadow of unease curled itself around my ribs. It was the same feeling that woke me in the middle of the night lately, with the echo of my mother's voice in my head. Hannah, listen to your gut. Women always know before anyone else does. And as I stood there watching dawn break across our quiet street, I thought about how true that was. Because even though Ethan was still asleep in the bedroom down the hall, and Mia was dreaming softly in her pink comforter upstairs, something in me already sensed that our lives were about to change forever. And not just because Noah was coming. No, it was something else entirely. Something darker waiting just beyond the edge of this perfect, peaceful morning. "Mama, look at my project." Mia's voice echoed down the hallway like sunlight piercing fog. I turned from the window, startled by the sudden warmth in her words. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, her small frame almost hidden behind the cardboard solar system she held in front of her chest. The planets swung slightly from their strings as she adjusted her grip, eyes bright with excitement. I smiled despite the heaviness in my chest. "Hold on, honey. Let me come down." Each step was a careful negotiation with my aching back, and the firm kick Noah delivered to my ribs, as if protesting the movement. But when I reached the living room and saw Mia's face up close, everything else faded away. She had spent hours on this model. Each foam ball was painted with precise colors and dotted with flecks of white to mimic distant craters and swirling storms. Even tiny Pluto dangled on the far edge, refusing to be forgotten. The string holding Saturn had come loose, and she had secured it again with purple glitter tape. It wasn't just a school project. It was Mia's world, recreated in miniature, delicate, and infinite all at once. "What do you think, Mama?" Her eyes searched my face with an urgency I knew too well. The desperate hope for approval, the need to be seen. I reached out and traced the rings of Saturn with my fingertip. "It's beautiful, Mia. You didn't miss a single detail." Her shoulders relaxed, a shy smile spreading across her lips. I saw a flicker of relief in her expression, and for a moment I hated how easily she worried about my opinion. She was only 8, and yet already she measured her worth against my moods, my words, my quiet silences. "Your teacher will be so impressed," I said, brushing a stray curl away from her forehead. "I'm so proud of you." "Really?" she whispered, voice trembling with a joy that cut through my heart. I nodded, unable to speak. She set the model down on the coffee table with gentle care, then turned back to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. As she pressed her cheek against my belly, Noah shifted inside me as if drawn to her warmth. "Hey, little brother," Mia whispered to my stomach. "It's Mia. I can't wait to meet you." I blinked rapidly, feeling tears gather behind my lashes. I rested my hand on the back of her head, feeling her soft curls under my palm. The scent of strawberry shampoo clung to her hair, sweet and achingly innocent. She pulled back slightly, her brown eyes filled with wonder. "Mama, do you think he can hear me in there?" "I think he can hear every word you say," I whispered. "And I think he already knows how much his big sister loves him." Her smile grew radiant and pure. For a moment, the heaviness pressing against my ribs lifted. The living room filled with dawn light washing over Mia's project, over the quiet walls, over the ache in my bones, and the fear tucked beneath my heart. In that golden glow, all I saw was her. My first miracle. My brave girl. My reason to keep breathing on days when everything else felt dark. But as I pulled her into my arms again, pressing my lips to her temple, I felt that same sliver of unease crawl up my spine. Because loving her this deeply meant that if the darkness ever came for us, it would not touch her first. It would have to go through me. And God help anyone who tried. "Is Daddy coming home early today?" Mia asked, her voice hopeful, as she looked up at me from where she sat, cross-legged on the floor, carefully adjusting the orbit strings on her solar system model. The question felt like a stone dropped into a still pond. I hesitated, adjusting the hem of my cardigan over my belly, as I tried to find an answer that wouldn't dim the glow in her eyes. "He has an important meeting with clients today, baby," I said softly. "But you can definitely show him your project tomorrow morning." Mia's smile faltered for a brief second before she forced it back into place. She nodded and turned her attention back to the dangling planets, gently flicking Jupiter so it spun slowly in place. "He's been busy a lot lately," she murmured almost to herself. I watched her small fingers twist the purple glitter tape around Saturn's loose ring again. Something twisted in my chest. Busy. That was one way to put it. Ethan's job as a sales manager for a medical equipment company had always kept him on the move. But lately it felt like he lived out of hotel rooms, more than he lived at home. Long trips to New York, Chicago, Denver. Late-night conference calls in the guest room with the door closed. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night to find his side of the bed cold, the sheets smoothed flat, as if he'd never been there at all. "He's working hard for us," I said, but the words felt brittle in my mouth. Mia didn't answer, just hummed softly under her breath, eyes downcast. I sat down on the couch with a quiet groan, feeling Noah kick in protest at the sudden shift in posture. I pressed my hand against my belly, willing him to settle. Across the room, sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds, striping Mia's hair in golden shadow. I tried to focus on her, on the way her small shoulders curved inward with concentration, but my mind kept drifting to Ethan. When we first met, he was magnetic, confident, funny, the kind of man who lit up a room and made you feel lucky to stand beside him. He would bring home white lilies for me on Thursdays, simply because they were almost the weekend flowers, and he knew I liked the smell. He used to pull Mia onto his lap after dinner, teaching her silly card tricks that always ended with her squealing in delight. But lately something felt fractured. He still kissed me goodbye each morning, but his lips felt colder. His eyes flickered away too quickly. There were moments when he seemed lost in thoughts. I could never reach his phone lighting up with messages. He didn't share his smile fading too fast when he saw me watching him. He said he was tired, that the traveling wore him down. He said the second baby was giving him anxiety. He said so many things, but none of them sounded like the truth. I told myself I was imagining it. Hormones, exhaustion, the loneliness that came with late pregnancy and Ethan's frequent absence. But as I sat there watching Mia loop another string around Neptune, my chest ached with an unspoken truth I wasn't ready to admit. Mama Mia's voice pulled me back. She looked up, eyes wide and gentle. "When Noah comes, will Daddy have more time to stay home?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile I wasn't sure I believed in. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really do." But inside, beneath the warmth of the morning light and the softness of Mia's question, a silent fear grew roots. Because deep down, I already knew Ethan was drifting further and further away from us. And soon, I would no longer be able to pretend he was just busy. That evening, as the sun slipped beneath the line of bare trees and dusk swallowed the neighborhood in quiet blue, I heard the front door open. The sound echoed through the house, breaking the stillness I hadn't realized had settled around me all day. "Daddy's home!" Mia squealed, scrambling up from the floor, where she'd been sketching Saturn's rings in her science notebook. The pencil rolled away, clattering softly against the coffee table as she ran barefoot across the hardwood floors. I pushed myself off the couch with a soft grunt, one hand supporting my aching back. My heart was beating too quickly, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was relief, or maybe it was something colder. From the kitchen doorway, I watched as Ethan crouched down to hug Mia. His tie was loosened shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed. He smelled faintly of stale coffee and the metallic tang of cold winter air. "Whoa, what's this?" he asked, gesturing to the solar system model still proudly displayed on the table. "It's my science project," Mia said, practically vibrating with joy. "I made it all by myself. Mama helped me find the string sizes for the right distances." "That's amazing, sweetheart." He ruffled her hair, flashing her the smile that once melted me from across crowded rooms. "You're a genius, just like your mom." I felt the corners of my lips tug upward automatically at his words, though the warmth didn't reach my chest. He stood and glanced over at me, his eyes scanning my face, before settling on my belly. "Hey," he said softly. "How's my boy today?" "He's been busy kicking me in the ribs all afternoon," I replied with a faint laugh. Ethan walked over, pressing a light kiss against my temple before resting his palm on my stomach. His hand felt heavy, almost foreign, but Noah stirred beneath it, shifting under the warmth of his father's touch. "He's strong," Ethan murmured, a flicker of something pride maybe passing through his expression. But just as quickly as it came, it faded. He pulled away, rubbing a hand over his face. Deep shadows pooled under his eyes. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "Yeah," he sighed, loosening his tie further and tossing it on the kitchen counter. "The Denver account is falling apart. They're demanding a new proposal by Friday, or they'll go with MedTech instead." I nodded, watching him move around the kitchen, opening the fridge and grabbing a bottle of water. His movements were sharp and restless, as if he couldn't stay still long enough to catch his breath. He took a long drink, staring at the floor, with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "Dinner's ready if you're hungry," I offered. He shook his head. "I ate with clients." His eyes flickered up to meet mine, then away again just as quickly. "But thanks." In the silence that followed, I heard Mia humming to herself as she organized her colored pencils in the living room. I wanted to go to her to anchor myself in her simple, bright presence. Instead, I forced myself to hold Ethan's gaze, searching for something familiar in his tired features. "Ethan," I began softly, "are you okay?" For a second, his expression faltered. His shoulders sagged, and he looked like the man I used to know, vulnerable, weary human. But then he straightened, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine, Hannah. Just work stress. I'll be better once things settle down." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. I wanted to close the distance between us, to touch his face, and tell him everything would be okay. But something in his eyes stopped me. A flicker of darkness I didn't recognize. "Come sit with us," I said instead. "Mia wants to show you her Saturn drawings. In a minute." He turned away, pulling his phone from his pocket as it buzzed with an incoming notification. His thumb hovered over the screen, his eyes narrowing slightly as he read whatever message had come through. Then he locked it quickly, slipping it back into his pocket with a sharp exhale. "I'll just take a quick shower," he mumbled, already moving toward the stairs. I watched his back as he disappeared down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps fading with each step. Mia appeared beside me, her brown eyes questioning. "Is Daddy okay?" "He's just tired, baby," I whispered, brushing a curl behind her ear. But as I pulled her into a hug, feeling her warmth and softness against my chest, I couldn't silence the thought echoing in my mind. Tired men still come home, but men with secrets, they never really do. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the rhythmic rise and fall of Ethan's breathing beside me. He had fallen asleep quickly, turning away from me without a word after his shower. The smell of his shampoo still lingered on the sheets, sharp and clean, mixing with the softer scent of lavender from my pillow. Noah kicked again, a quick jab under my ribs that made me wince. I shifted onto my side, pressing my hand to the tight swell of my belly. "Settle down, little one," I whispered into the darkness. "Mama needs to sleep." But sleep was impossible. My mind kept replaying the flicker of something unreadable in Ethan's eyes, the way his thumb hovered over his phone screen, as if it burned to touch. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his back as he walked away from me earlier, carrying secrets I wasn't allowed to know. Sometime after midnight, I must have dozed off because I woke with a start, to a deep, twisting pain in my lower abdomen. I sucked in a sharp breath as the pain intensified, radiating across my hips like an iron band, tightening around my bones. A strangled gasp escaped my lips. Hannah Ethan mumbled beside me, his voice thick with sleep. Another contraction hit sharper this time, stealing my breath. I clutched the bedsheet, trying to focus through the rolling pain. "I think it's time," I whispered, fighting to keep my voice calm. "It's happening, Ethan. Noah's coming." He shot up in bed, his eyes wide and bleary. "What now?" "But it's a week early." I know I said, forcing myself to breathe through the contraction, but he doesn't care about the schedule. For a brief moment, fear flickered across his face before he sprang into action, pulling on a pair of jeans and grabbing his phone from the nightstand. "I'll call the hospital," he said, his voice shaking. "And Sophie, we need her to watch Mia." "No." I gasped as the contraction faded, leaving behind a dull pulsing ache. "Call Sophie to take me. You have that flight in the morning, remember? The Denver presentation." He stopped staring at me as if I had just spoken in another language. "Are you serious right now? You have to go." "Ethan," I said, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "This could take hours. I'll be okay with Sophie." He ran a hand through his hair, his expression torn between relief and guilt. Another contraction surged through me, and I clenched my teeth, gripping the edge of the mattress until my knuckles turned white. "Please," I whispered through the pain. "Just call her." He nodded, fumbling with his phone as he moved to the hallway. I heard him speaking in a low, urgent voice. Moments later, Mia appeared at the bedroom door, rubbing her eyes, her unicorn pajamas rumpled from sleep. "Mama," she said softly, her voice trembling. "What's wrong?" I forced a smile despite the pain tearing through my abdomen. "It's okay, baby. Noah just decided he wants to meet us early." Her eyes widened in sleepy wonder. "He's coming now. Soon," I said, wincing as another contraction gripped me. "Sophie's coming to take me to the hospital. You stay here with Daddy, okay?" She nodded, but her small face crumpled in worry. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me as far as she could reach, resting her cheek against my belly. I felt her warm breath through the thin fabric of my nightgown. "Be brave, Mama," she whispered. "Come back soon with Noah." I pressed a trembling kiss to her forehead. "I promise." Within 15 minutes, Sophie arrived, her hair pulled back in a quick ponytail and her eyes wide with concern. She helped me into my coat, draping a blanket over my shoulders as we stepped out into the icy night air. The world outside was silent and dark, the neighborhood sleeping peacefully under a moonless sky. From the doorway, Ethan watched us leave, his silhouette, tall and unmoving against the porch light. For a moment, our eyes met and something passed between us. Regret, fear, love, betrayal, 1,000 emotions in one fleeting second. Then the pain swallowed me again, and I had no space left for him in that moment. Only Noah. As Sophie eased me into the passenger seat, Mia's voice drifted down the front steps, thin and wavering with sleep. "Bye, Mama. Bye, Noah. Come home safe." I clutched my belly, feeling another contraction build like an oncoming storm. As Sophie pulled away from the curb, the world outside blurred into streaks of streetlights and shadows, and a single thought pounded in my mind with every ragged breath. "Please, God, keep us safe. Bring us home." The labor was faster than I expected. Within hours of arriving at the hospital, Noah was in my arms, tiny, warm, and impossibly real. He let out one sharp cry before settling into quiet breaths, as if the world outside the womb didn't frighten him at all. His hair was damp and dark against his forehead, his skin flushed pink with life. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed my lips to his temple, inhaling his raw newborn scent, a mix of milk and blood, and something purely divine. "You did so well," Hannah, Sophie whispered, brushing my hair away from my sweaty forehead. Her eyes shone with relief and awe as she looked down at Noah. He's perfect. I was too tired to speak. My body felt hollowed out, shaking with fatigue and adrenaline. All I could do was stare at him, memorizing every wrinkle of his skin, every flicker of his eyelids. Later that morning, after Sophie left to pick up Mia from school, Ethan arrived at the hospital still wearing his navy suit from his meeting. His tie was loosened shirt wrinkled at the waist, where he had slept in airplane seats. He stood at the foot of my bed, eyes locked on Noah, in my arms. God, he whispered, voice rough. He's beautiful. I didn't reply. I watched him. Watching Noah searching his face for something real. Relief, love, guilt. His expression flickered too quickly to catch. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. I turned to see a nurse entering the room, pushing a small tray of medication. She was young, maybe late 20s, with sleek dark hair tied back in a perfect bun under her cap. Her skin was pale and flawless lips, painted in a muted rose color that didn't match the rest of her understated uniform. Her name tag read, Amber R. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris," she said, her smile bright and practiced. "How are we feeling today?" "Exhausted," I replied, attempting a weak smile. She let out a tinkling laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's to be expected. Giving birth isn't easy business." She walked over to the bassinet and peered down at Noah, her smile widening. "Oh, he's a strong-looking boy," she murmured, reaching out to gently brush his cheek with the back of her gloved finger. "What's his name, Noah?" I said quietly, tightening my hold on him without thinking. Her eyes flicked to mine for a brief moment, dark brown irises, ringed with hazel almost golden near the pupils. There was a sharpness there, something assessing. It made my skin prickle. Then her gaze shifted to Ethan, lingering a second too long before returning to her tray. "I have your scheduled pain medication here along with a mild sedative to help you sleep later," she said, her tone smooth and polite. "Doctor's orders?" "I don't think I need a sedative," I replied, glancing down at Noah. "I'd rather stay awake with him." Her smile froze, just for a fraction of a second. Then it was back in place, even warmer than before. "Of course. I'll just leave it here in case you change your mind." She set the small paper cup down on the tray stand beside me and began checking my vitals. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, but her gaze flicked to Ethan again and again. Each time he caught her eye, she would look away, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Your husband must be so proud," she said lightly as she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "He is," I replied, my voice flat. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly, but said nothing. Amber unwrapped the cuff from my arm and scribbled something in my chart. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost intimate. "First babies are special, but there's something about the second that changes everything. Don't you think?" Her eyes bored into mine, unblinking. "It redefines your family, your priorities." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Before I could respond, she turned away, collecting her tray. "I'll be back in a few hours to check your pain levels," she said, flashing another bright, empty smile. As she reached the door, she paused, glancing over her shoulder at Ethan. "Don't hesitate to call if your wife needs anything." Then she was gone, leaving a faint waft of floral perfume in her wake. The room fell silent. I shifted Noah in my arms, my chest tightening with unease I couldn't explain. "Do you know her?" I asked Ethan quietly, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He shook his head too quickly. "No. Why?" "No reason," I whispered, though my mind churned with questions. I looked down at Noah, his tiny lips twitching in sleep, and a single terrifying thought formed in the back of my mind, uninvited, unbidden, but stubborn in its certainty. That woman knows more about us than she should, and somehow, I knew this was only the beginning. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the hospital window, bathing the white walls in a soft, sleepy glow. I lay back in bed with Noah curled against my chest, his breath warm and feather light. For the first time since the contractions began, my body felt still heavy, sore but still. It should have been peaceful. But it wasn't. A strange drowsiness was spreading through me thick and slow, like molasses seeping through my limbs. My arms felt heavier. My eyelids drooped without warning. I blinked hard trying to focus, but the edges of the room blurred. I hadn't taken the sedative Nurse Amber left on the tray. I was sure of it. Noah stirred against my chest, a soft whimper escaping him. I pressed my lips to his hair, struggling to keep my head upright. A low buzz filled my ears. My thoughts drifted like smoke. What's wrong with me just then? The door creaked open. Amber walked in, her smile already in place. "Oh, you're still awake," she said sweetly, setting down another tray. I tried to speak, but my words tangled in my throat. I didn't take it. I managed my voice slurred. Her smile didn't flicker. The pain meds can have that effect. They're stronger than you think. Completely normal. But it wasn't normal. I'd taken painkillers after giving birth to Mia. Nothing had ever knocked me out like this. Not this fast. Not this deeply. My body felt hijacked. My brain fogged. Amber reached over and gently lifted Noah from my arms. "Let me place him in the bassinet so you can rest. You'll feel better when you wake." "No," I said weakly, tightening my grip instinctively. She hesitated, then gave a soft laugh. "Just for a moment, Mrs. Harris. He'll be right beside you." I didn't have the strength to fight her. She laid him in the bassinet, tucking the blanket around him with a too-smooth gesture, then adjusted the IV line connected to my arm. She made a note on her clipboard, then checked the drip bag hanging beside the bed. "Your blood pressure's a little low," she murmured almost to herself. I turned my head slowly, watching her from the corner of my eye. Something about the way her fingers moved, casual but precise, unsettled me. Then I saw it, a quick glance at the door, a flick of her phone screen half hidden behind her clipboard. She tapped something, then slid it away in her scrub pocket. "Who is she messaging?" My chest tightened. I didn't know how much longer I could stay conscious. "Try to rest," she said one last time before leaving the room. As the door clicked shut, a wave of sleep dragged me under like a riptide. I tried to fight it, but my limbs betrayed me. My last thought before darkness claimed me was not about pain or fear. It was Noah. I needed to wake for him. I had to protect him. And in the center of that sleep-heavy storm, a question looped over and over, like a warning bell. What did she put in my IV? I woke with a gasp, heart pounding, throat dry. The clock on the wall read 12:17 p.m. I'd been asleep for nearly 4 hours. My mouth tasted metallic, and my arms buzzed with pins and needles. Noah was no longer in my arms. Panic struck until I saw him in the bassinet beside the bed, fast asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. A nurse I didn't recognize stood nearby, gently, cradling Noah and rocking him back and forth. When she noticed I was awake, she smiled kindly and said she'd found him a bit fussy and figured I'd want the rest. I nodded, still groggy, mumbling something about the medication hitting me too hard. She gave me a sympathetic look and promised to check with the doctor about adjusting the dosage next time. As she handed Noah back to me and quietly left the room, a strange nausea crept up, not from the meds, but something deeper, instinctual, wrong. The door burst open again and Mia rushed in, cheeks pink from the cold, a small bouquet clutched in her mittened hands. "Mama!" She squealed, darting to my bedside and throwing her arms around me with a force that felt more like desperation than excitement, as if she was afraid I might disappear. I whispered her name and held her close, breathing in the scent of apples and winter. I asked if she'd met her brother. She leaned over to peer into the bassinet, her eyes softening. "He's so tiny," she murmured. I smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face, reminding her she'd once been that tiny too. But then her expression shifted. Her eyes still fixed on the bassinet darkened, guarded. She hesitated, glanced toward the door, then back at me. She whispered that Sophie was buying drinks. And then, "Mama, I need to tell you something." Her voice snapped my mind into razor focus. Mia said she'd seen the nurse, the pretty one with dark hair, the one I didn't recognize. She'd seen her 2 weeks ago after school sitting outside the ice cream shop. With Daddy. She'd been in the car. He didn't know she saw them. My breath caught. She said they were talking. The woman leaned in close. Daddy looked angry, but then he put his hand on hers. Mia hadn't told me before because she thought it was work. But then just today she saw her again, in the hallway, talking to Daddy. They didn't see her, but Mia heard it. The woman said, "We'll do it today." And Daddy said, "Not yet." The room spun. I clutched Noah to my chest, trying to steady my breath. I asked Mia if she was sure. Her face was fierce with honesty. "I wouldn't lie, Mama." "I promise." I believed her. Mia never made things up, and her wide brown eyes held no confusion, only fear. I glanced at the IV bag, remembering the nurse's too sweet smile, the crushing fatigue, the fact that she knew Ethan's name the way she'd whispered to someone just outside the room. My blood turned to ice. Mamma Mia asked softly, "Yes, baby. Is that nurse a bad person?" I couldn't answer, because for the first time since Noah's birth, the truth felt too heavy to speak. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We weren't safe. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed faintly, casting a sterile glow across the hospital room. But everything else felt unnervingly still. Mia sat curled at the foot of my bed, clutching the small bouquet she had brought like it was a shield. Her wide eyes tracked every movement, and beside me Noah slept soundly in the bassinet, his tiny breaths forming a rhythm I clung to my only anchor, as Mia's words continued to echo in my head. "We'll do it today. Not yet." A cold unease had taken root in my spine, threading into every nerve. Mamma Mia's voice broke the silence like a whisper slipping through cracks. Her face was scary. I glanced down at her. "What do you mean?" She looked angry, she said without hesitation, but like she was hiding it. Like when someone smiles but it's fake. Like lying. I swallowed hard bile rising in my throat. There was more to this than I had let myself believe. A few minutes later, Sophie returned with a cup of tea for me and a juice box for Mia. I thanked her with a forced smile, trying to seem normal, while my inside screamed warnings. My hands trembled beneath the blanket. Then came a knock at the door. Amber walked in as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Her appearance was impeccable. Hair neatly pinned, lips glossed her smile wide and falsely sweet. She moved like she owned the room. "Oh, Mia," she cooed. "I've heard so much about you from your mommy. It's so nice to finally meet you." I froze. I had never once mentioned Mia to her. Mia clutched her juice tighter, her eyes darting to me in panic. "I don't know this nurse," she whispered under her breath. Amber's smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker at the corner of her mouth, the subtle clench of her jaw. She turned to the IV stand and held up a small paper cup containing a single pill. "Medication time," she said lightly. "What is it?" My voice was taut. "Just an antibiotic. The doctor added it to prevent postpartum infection," she answered smoothly. That was a lie. My doctor had said nothing of the sort. I reached for the pill with a trembling hand, pretended to accept it, then quickly closed my fist around it and slipped it under the blanket. I wouldn't swallow it. Not this time. Amber lingered longer than necessary. Her eyes flicked from Mia to Sophie, then back to me. Finally, she offered another hollow smile. "I'll be back in a little while to check on you." The door clicked shut behind her. I turned immediately to Sophie. "Did the doctor say anything about antibiotics this morning?" She frowned, her concern clear. No. Just something about adjusting your pain meds. I opened my fist. The pill glinted coldly in my palm, deliberate and threatening. That woman is not who she says she is, I whispered. Mia slid closer, urgency trembling in her voice. Mama, I just saw her again, in the hallway, with Daddy. Time stopped. They didn't see me, but she said, we'll do it today. And Daddy, he looked scared. He said, not yet. Then she got mad. She said, you promised. A crack split through my chest. I turned to Sophie, who had gone pale. Realization hit her fast, sharp as a blade. We need help. I said the words rasping out. A doctor or security. But before she could move, voices echoed just outside the door, low, urgent. Amber's voice and Ethan's. Mama Mia's voice was barely audible now, weighted with dread. She climbed into the bed beside me, clutching my arm like it was the last safe thing in the world. She's coming. Draw the curtain, I whispered. Mia ran to the window and yanked the heavy fabric shut. The room dimmed instantly, cast in twilight. What are you doing? Sophie asked, her voice trembling. Hiding. Still holding Noah with one arm and dragging the IV stand with the other, I eased out of bed. Every step felt like a knife, but adrenaline dulled the pain. I knelt, motioned Mia down, and together we crawled beneath the hospital bed. From under the door frame, we could see shadows moving through the thin crack beneath the door. The knob turned. Soft, cautious footsteps. Amber. I pressed Noah to my chest, covering his head. Mia curled up against me, her breathing short and rapid. Where did she go? Amber's voice drifted through the room like smoke. She moved with strange purpose, then pressed the nurse call button. Patient missing, she announced over the intercom, calm and cool. A few seconds later, another set of heavier footsteps. It was Ethan. What are you doing? His voice was strained with anger. She's gone, Amber replied smoothly. But not for long. Her voice had changed. The edges were sharp as ice. Your obstacle will be gone tonight. Just one shot, just like we planned. Silence. Ethan's voice broke. We didn't plan this. I said I wanted out. That's all. You said we'd be together. She snapped. You said the baby would be ours. The air left my lungs. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid they might hear it. Ethan, my husband. He didn't mean it, but he meant something. He'd opened the door. And now she was here. Ready. Armed. I looked down at Noah's serene face, at Mia's trembling form, at the dim glow of the IV pole. Then, at the nurse call button on my wrist. My thumb hovered over it. It was now or never. Under the hospital bed, I clutched Noah tightly to my chest. Every inch of my body ached, but terror sharpened my senses. Mia pressed against my side, her small fingers digging into my arm breath, shallow and fast. From our narrow view beneath the bed, the spotless white shoes of Nurse Amber moved methodically across the floor. She was pacing, circling, hunting. She muttered to herself, wondering aloud where I had gone, and the sheets rustled as she patted the mattress above us. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Noah shifted slightly in my arms and I kissed his forehead, praying he'd stay quiet. Mia's grip on my hand tightened. Then slowly, she reached up and gently covered my mouth. Her wide, frightened eyes met mine silently, pleading, don't make a sound. I nodded, proud of her stillness. Carefully, I pressed the emergency call button strapped to my wrist. A faint beep confirmed the signal had gone through. Please let someone be listening. The door creaked open again. Heavier steps entered the room. Ethan's voice followed, sharp and frantic, demanding to know where I was. But Amber, cold and composed, told him I was gone, but not for long. I could hear the hitch in Ethan's breath, quick and unsteady. Amber's tone turned surgical as she explained how I'd soon be out of the way, How one injection would be enough, just like they planned. My heart nearly stopped. Ethan snapped, denying any agreement. He'd said he wanted out, nothing more. But Amber wouldn't let go. She reminded him they'd planned everything. Once the baby was born, there would be no more Hannah. No guilt. A clean slate. He protested he never wanted anyone hurt. This wasn't what he meant. But Amber's voice shook now, not with fear, but rage. The real insanity, she claimed, was watching him crawl back to me after everything he'd promised her. Silence fell brief and suffocating. Then came the final nail, her voice low, glacial. If I was still alive, I was the obstacle, and obstacles needed to be removed. Mia whimpered beside me. I pulled her closer, shielding her with my body. My eyes darted to the bassinet stand. The ivy pole glowed faintly in the dark, and just above it I saw the nurse call light. Blink out. Someone had heard it. The door burst open. A nurse's voice cut through the tension, asking if everything was all right. Amber spun around, insisting I couldn't have gone far. Then the nurse noticed it, the syringe in Amber's hand, and her voice rose laced with alarm. What was Amber doing? Amber shrieked for her not to interfere. Chaos exploded. The nurse yelled for security. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. A crash echoed metal against tile. Ethan shouted in pain. Another voice called out. Amber had a syringe. She screamed, unhinged, wild. Then suddenly silence. A male voice spoke at last, calm and steady. They had her. She was restrained. Only then did I realize I'd been holding my breath. I turned to Mia, whispering that it was safe now. We could go. Cradling Noah, dragging the IV stand, I crawled out from under the bed. Mia followed, still gripping my arm. The room was in disarray. Security guards pinned Amber against the wall. Her face was twisted in fury, cheeks flushed, hair tangled and wild. Her eyes gleamed with madness. Ethan stood to the side shirt, torn scratches across his cheek. Not speaking, a nurse gaped at me. You were under the bed, I answered hoarsely. Yes, with my daughter. We were hiding. Mia stepped forward, her voice small but unwavering. We had been scared of that woman. Amber's eyes locked on us, burning with betrayal. She hissed that I had ruined everything, that we could have been happy. But someone shouted to take her away, and as they dragged her out, she fought violently, screaming Ethan's name again and again. He didn't look at her. He looked at us. His family. What was left of it. The room had been cleared, the chaos swept away. But the silence left behind felt heavier than anything else. Noah slept peacefully in my arms, oblivious to the nightmare that had nearly unfolded above him. Mia sat beside me on the new hospital bed. They'd transferred us to her head, resting on my shoulder, her little hand still holding onto the hem of my gown like an anchor. Sophie stood near the window, speaking in hushed tones, with a uniformed officer. The hospital administrator had arrived shortly after the incident, looking pale and horrified, his words stumbling over apologies and promises of full cooperation. I barely registered any of it. My eyes kept drifting to the door, expecting someone to burst in again. But it never came. Instead, it was the police who returned. They brought updates in clipped, quiet voices. The syringe Rachel Amber had carried was confirmed to contain a lethal dose of morphine. She had falsified her nursing credentials, entered the hospital system under a fake identity, and had a documented history of psychiatric institutionalization. She'd been fired from 2 previous hospitals under suspicious circumstances that had somehow never followed her on paper, but that wasn't all. An officer came into the room mid-afternoon, a man in his 40s with a tired face and steady eyes. He asked to speak to me alone. Sophie took Mia to the cafeteria for juice and distraction. Mrs. Harris, he began carefully. We're now officially classifying your case as an attempted homicide with conspiracy to commit murder. My body stiffened. We have reason to believe Ethan Harris was aware of Rachel Collins's intent to harm you. Perhaps not in full detail, but enough that he had legal and moral obligations to act, and did not. I couldn't speak. The officer continued. We've obtained message records from Rachel's phone. There are over 50 deleted texts between them in the last 2 weeks. Some included phrases like, "She'll be gone soon," and "After the baby, it's us." He never reported her behavior. He never came forward. My throat dried. Are you saying he's under arrest? The officer said quietly. For negligent complicity and failure to prevent a felony act. The district attorney is pursuing charges. I stared at the hospital blanket. The pattern suddenly surreal. Tiny repeating blue squares that looked like broken grids. Ethan. The man I had built my life around. The father of my children. He hadn't stabbed me. He hadn't injected me. But he had opened the door, held it open, then stood by and watched. I understand this is difficult, the officer said. But we need you to confirm that you never gave consent to Rachel administering any drugs outside normal procedure. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't. Not once. He left shortly after thanking me for my cooperation. The weight of his words stayed behind like smoke that refused to clear. When Sophie returned with Mia, I pulled my daughter into my lap, cradling her gently beside Noah. She looked up at me with big searching eyes. Is Daddy in trouble? I paused, brushing hair from her forehead. Yes, baby. He made bad choices. And when people hurt others even by staying silent, they have to answer for it. Mia didn't cry. She just nodded solemnly and leaned into me like she understood far more than an 8-year-old should. Later that evening, after the children were asleep and Sophie had stepped out to make calls, I stood at the hospital window looking down at the city lights below. I thought about the man Ethan had been, who held my hand during our first ultrasound, who sang lullabies to Mia in the kitchen. Then I thought about the man who looked away while danger crept into my room, who didn't stop her. He hadn't held the needle, but he hadn't held the line either. And now the consequences belonged to him. 3 months later, the snow had melted into soft earth, and our new home sat quietly at the edge of a sleepy cul-de-sac, surrounded by evergreens and silence. The air smelled of damp leaves and distant fireplaces. It was smaller than the house on Oak Ridge Street, more modest, more worn, but the moment I stepped into it with Mia in one hand and Noah in the other, it felt like safety. The porch was narrow, but just wide enough for a rocking chair. That's where I sat now, a blanket across my lap, Noah sleeping against my chest. Mia danced barefoot across the garden path, her arms outstretched, chasing the shadow of a butterfly that refused to be caught. There was laughter in her voice again. Not every day, not always, but it came more easily now. She'd been seeing a child therapist twice a week. At first, she didn't speak much, just colored quietly, often in deep reds and blacks. But slowly, the colors lightened. Blues returned, then greens. And finally last week, she drew a picture of herself holding hands with Noah. Under the sketch in shaky block letters she'd written, I protected him. And she had. I stroked Noah's soft hair as he stirred, then settled back into sleep. His eyelashes fluttered against his cheeks, his mouth forming the hint of a smile the way babies sometimes do, as if they remember something, warm from another life. Ethan hadn't come to see him. The trial was pending. He'd been released on bail but moved to the West Coast. The last time we spoke, it was through a lawyer. The court had granted me full custody of both children. Child support arrived on time, signed and emotionless. He called Mia once a month. Short conversations filled with awkward pauses and strained promises. I didn't hate him, but I didn't forgive him either. Some wounds didn't need vengeance. They needed distance. Would you like some tea? Sophie's voice called softly from the back door. She appeared with 2 mugs and a tired smile. Since the day she rushed me to the hospital, she'd become more than a friend. She was family now, in every sense that mattered. She visited every weekend, helped with laundry, read stories to Mia when I couldn't keep my eyes open. When she held Noah, I saw something reverent in her face, like she too understood the miracle we had survived. "Thank you," I said, taking the cup from her. "I still don't know how I would have gotten through without you." "Don't say that." She sat beside me, pulling the blanket over both our laps. "You got through it because you're stronger than you think." I looked out at Mia, now crouched near a patch of clover, whispering to something only she could see. Her curls had grown longer, softer. She looked so much like Ethan sometimes that it caught my breath, but then she'd say something fierce and wise, and I knew she was mine. "She's brave," I said. "She saved our lives." Sophie nodded. "And she knows it. That kind of courage, it leaves a mark. But it can also be her shield." The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of lavender from the neighbor's garden. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the mug and the weight of Noah's small body ground me. Each morning began with the same soft sounds, a spoon tapping the edge of a ceramic bowl, the gentle hiss of warming formula, and Mia's humming in the kitchen like the house was her private stage, and we were her favorite audience. Noah was 3 months old now, just starting to recognize familiar faces. Every time Mia leaned it in close, he grinned so wide his whole body wriggled with joy. She called herself the real big sister and insisted on helping change his diapers, though she never quite got it right without dropping a wipe or putting his onesie on backwards. Still, she tried. She always tried. I'd started working again 3 days a week at the local library. Sophie had made the introduction, and I couldn't be more grateful. Saturday morning story time had become something of a sacred space. I'd stand in front of the kids, a worn book in hand, and remember who I used to be, someone who believed in the power of words, to rescue people, someone who loved to tell stories. Mia always sat at the back, Noah in her lap, eyes never straying far from me. As if checking, "Are you still okay, Mama? Are we safe now?" I'd smile back, steady as I could. The truth was, I was still scared. Still woke up in the middle of the night, heart racing at every creak in the hallway. Still tensed at the sight of white scrubs in a clinic corridor. There were days when I'd walk past a hospital on my way to work and feel my throat close. Memories slamming into me like wind against glass. But I'd learned something. Fear wasn't weakness. It was a survivor's signal. It meant I was still here, still fighting. Some nights after both kids were asleep, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea and listen to the wind through the trees. I never turned on the TV. I didn't need the noise. The silence was enough a companion, not an enemy. I'd watch the streetlights shimmer on wet pavement and count blessings like Mia used to count stars, one for Lily's laughter, returning another for Noah's peaceful sleep, a third for the breath in my lungs. Michael called once, 2 weeks after the court decision. I didn't answer. He sent a message, "Please tell the kids I love them." I deleted it. Mia never asked for him. Lily did in her own way by not asking at all. We were rebuilding one bedtime story at a time. One diaper, one gentle morning, one cup of warmed milk. Trauma didn't vanish, it curled up quietly inside you, waiting. But I had something stronger now. I had us. And in this quiet corner of the world, surrounded by paperbacks and picture books with my daughter humming in the kitchen and my son cooing in her arms, I finally believed what I'd once doubted so deeply. We were going to be okay. It was a quiet Saturday, and we'd laid out a blanket beneath the budding trees in the park near our new house. Sophie brought apple pie. I packed 2 second-hand comic books Mia had fallen in love with. Noah kicked happily on the quilt, squealing at the sun as if it were an old friend. A young couple passed by pushing a stroller, hands intertwined. I didn't feel envy. Just a soft kind of distance, the difference between those who sleep peacefully and those who must relearn how to trust the morning. There's a silence to that kind of knowing. It doesn't scream or ache. It just rests somewhere behind your ribs, a gentle reminder that peace isn't something you're given. It's something you earn, over and over again. Mia picked a tiny daisy and gently placed it on Noah's belly. "What do you think he dreams about?" she asked, her voice quiet and curious, as though she didn't want to wake whatever wonder lived inside her baby brother's thoughts. I looked at her, radiant in the gold light, her curls catching in the breeze. The child who had once hidden beneath a hospital bed now sat cross-legged under a sky that stretched endlessly above her. She was growing not just taller, but deeper. "I think he dreams of your voice," I said, "because every time you sing, he sleeps better." She giggled, tilting her face to the sky, a sound so pure it caught me off guard. No fear, no hesitation, just joy, real and effortless, the kind that rings like a bell in your soul. I sat there, heart-full hand resting over my chest. There were things I'd lost that could never be reclaimed. Trust, a marriage, years spent treading water in the dark, believing silence was safer than truth. But there were things that had risen from the ashes, of all that unshakable love strength I hadn't known I carried, and a new definition of family, not built by numbers, but by the depth of care, by choice, by constancy. Sophie reached over with a smile and refilled my cup of tea. "This," she said, gesturing to the blanket. "The breeze, the crumbs of pie crust clinging to Mia's chin, is what healing looks like." I nodded, grateful. It doesn't always feel like it. But then I blink and realize I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore. The breeze lifted again, scattering petals across the grass. Noah let out a delighted squeal, his tiny hands flailing toward the drifting pink and white. I didn't know what lay ahead for us. Life had taught me that peace could be fragile, that shadows didn't always knock before they entered. But I also knew something else now, something truer than fear. We had survived. And more than that, we were learning how to thrive. We stayed in the park until the light turned soft and golden, until the shadows lengthened and the day began to exhale. And as we packed up the blanket and gathered our little joys, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Ready to begin again. This story is a testament to the quiet strength of survivors who don't scream, but endure. It explores how betrayal can break us, but love, especially a mother's love, can rebuild us. Through Hannah, we see that healing is not linear, and that family is not defined by perfection, but by protection, courage, and presence. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, resilience is born from the smallest acts: a child's whisper, a sister's hand, a mother's refusal to give up. Surviving is not the end, but the beginning of something truly intense. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments.